I used to go to rodeos. I used to do a lot of things that now that I think of horses differently, and I have a rescue mentality, and I have a view that's changed so much about, like, does the horse enjoy this? Is this,
Mm.
like, what they want? And I had never really asked myself that question before.
Hey, I'm Emma, and welcome to Human Animals, the podcast where we explore the deep, complex, and often surprising relationships between people and the animals that share our world. In each episode, I'll invite a guest to dive into the bonds that unite us with the creatures we live alongside. Whether they are big or small, pets or wildlife, we'll unpack the ways animals shape our lives and challenge our understanding of what it means to be human. Join me on this journey where every episode is a reflection of the ties that bind us all. Y'all, I am so excited for this episode. I have known Clare and SkyDog for a few years now, and it's truly a remarkable operation. A few years ago, I rescued a Zorse. Yeah, you heard that right, a zebra and a horse cross from an exotic animal auction. And after working with him for a year, I knew Pete wanted to be wild. And I can't explain to you the relief that I felt then and that I still feel when I see him running on SkyDog land. He is absolutely thriving there, which we get into in this episode. Clare has an extensive background in the entertainment industry and has decided to dedicate the second half of her life to helping wild horses and donkeys of America. She does this through rescuing them from the kill pen, or taking them as owner surrenders, or directly from the BLM. She is truly boots on the ground, feeding and checking fence, and keeping everyone up to date on social media. If you haven't already, I highly suggest you go follow SkyDog online, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Fun fact, I have my own small business called Miko's Choice, which is the sponsor for this episode, because it's my business, this is my podcast, and I can make the rules. In all seriousness though, Miko's Choice offers high-quality CBD products for all animals: dogs, horses, pigs, cats, you name it, I have them covered. I used my background in animal science and cannabis to bring these products to life, and I'm beyond thrilled to see how they help improve animal health and wellness. They're also inspired by my personal animals and my own journey through breaking my back, recovering, and getting my dog through cancer. So there's a lot of love behind this business. Feel free to check it out at mikoschoice.com and use code HUMANANIMALS for a discount. If you have any questions, email me anytime, info@mikoschoice.com. That's MIKKOSCHOICE. Thanks. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Emma. It's so nice to see you.
Yes,
Pete's
you too.
mom.
Yeah. I'm so glad he's with you. So obviously I know a lot about you and SkyDog, and that's the reason that I brought Pete to you. And so thankful you took him. But I think it would be nice for everybody else to hear from you how you got started and a little bit about your why, which, as I understand, has to do with Buddy, the Mustang.
Buddy the Mustang. I know whenever I'm up in Oregon, I always have to go out to the big herd, of which he is the grand poobah leader.
Yeah.
I think they all recognize his status as the first Mustang in my life and the one that led me down this road. But yeah, I had a friend who I used to walk my dog. Actually, I had two Great Danes at the time when I moved to LA, and I used to walk them in Beechwood Canyon, which is kind of in the heart of LA, but is also this huge kind of open space, and it's where the Hollywood sign is and the observatory. But you can kind of ride around all these trails, and I used to walk my dogs there with a British friend of mine, and I see these horses going by, and one day I followed them. They kind of went down this little trail, and I looked down below, and there was this kind of all these pens full of horses, and I thought, oh my gosh, they have horses. Maybe I could ride. And I'd grown up riding. I loved horses my whole life. My life had often taken me back towards horses. So shortly after that, I met another girl who had a horse that she boarded there. And so I started going riding with her. And I started thinking, wow, could I have a horse in LA? Now I live here and ride about these hills. And so the first horse, I went there with her, and the guy that ran the place, Jason, he found me a quarter horse, who was my first horse, called Elvis, who is still with us. and now thinks he's a Mustang. But I had a lot of British friends that lived in LA, mostly actors, and they all knew how to ride. And so they wanted to come up and ride. And one of them, Matthew Reese, who was he's a Welsh actor that was on this show, Brothers and Sisters. He was like, I want to get a Mustang. And we actually went up to Reno, to Carson City, to the prison program, and got 2 prison trained Mustangs there. So from there, we used to kind of ride around the hills, the Hollywood Hills, and talk about what we could do to help these wild horses and save more of them. And somehow Buddy led me down the road. I met my husband. I started rescuing more horses because we had a bigger ranch. And one day I said the fateful words, we're going to need a bigger ranch, because I just realized how many Mustangs were in trouble, how many were in kill pens and running through livestock auctions and were untrainable, unadoptable. And so I started doing it just with my husband at my ranch, and then progressed to actually buying a much bigger ranch up in Oregon, which is our 9,000 acre sanctuary. And that's how it all began. It just, I never would have thought at the beginning. I always, even when I bought the big ranch, I thought, well, I'm going to save 75 horses and then call it good. Like I'm just going to sit under a tree. We had some pregnant mares, and I thought, well, I want to watch their babies grow up. But now it has grown. We're at like about 350 animals between Malibu and Oregon, 50 of them being donkeys, mules, zebra, all kinds of zonkey, and a horse. Hello, baby. Do you want to be on the Zoom too?
Oh, hi.
So yeah, 50 of those. And then we've got under 300 horses between the 2 places, but I guess we just grew 1 horse at a time.
Yeah, that's how it happens. But what a juxtaposition to be riding in the hills of LA, because that's where I grew up too. I grew up riding in the Malibu canyons and overlooking the city, and I've ridden those trails that you're talking about by the Hollywood sign. And it is so crazy to ride a wild, like any horse, but specifically a wild Mustang, just outside of one of the biggest cities in the world. Like, it's such a crazy difference.
Yeah. And I remember thinking that about Jimmy and Bono, who were the 2 horses Matthew and I went up and bid on and brought back down. They were both black and they were brothers. And I remember when we unloaded them, I mean, they're pretty green broke when you get them out of the prison program. So I remember loading them off the trailer and just thinking, wow, like what must they make of all the smells and sounds? Because they literally had gone from the range to the prison program where they had been trained to ride for 3 months. And then suddenly there they were. And I would remember riding around the hills, and they would look out and kind of look at these views. And it must have been such an extraordinary onslaught of smells and sounds and lights. I can't even imagine what it was like for them, but they handled it really well. They were incredible for being bomb-proof horses. It was kind of like, I mean, they were green broke horses, but they were pretty bomb-proof. They really treated us so well. They never, I mean, I think Bono bucked me off once. Bono had a big buck. And I would take my friends riding, and the boys always used to want to ride Bono, because when everybody went into a run or a canter, he would throw the biggest buck, like every single time, and do a squeal. He would squeal and buck because he was just excited from the surge of energy of the horses being able to run. And the boys were like, could they sit that buck or not? Because it was something. And some of them could and some of them couldn't. And that was kind of part of the fun back then. And it was crazy because I'm so different now the way I think about horses. But at the time, horses were just, for riding, not just for riding, but,
I know what you mean.
Way, we had 2 or 3 years of running those horses around the hills and riding them over the hill to a Mexican restaurant and galloping home after we'd had a few fishbowl margaritas, and like, I can't imagine it now because I rarely ride, and I don't have anything against people riding horses. I think horses would be in a lot more trouble if people stopped riding them altogether. But it's just so I guess my mentality changed a lot while I was rescuing and seeing where they'd come from and what they'd been through. In domestic life, often cruelty and abuse and neglect and starvation. I just didn't really want to ask anything else of them, and I just wanted to let them And some of them are still super affectionate, and some of them will come up and want a cookie and they'll let you love on them, but others are just happy to be left alone. You know, even ones that had been domesticated have gone back to being wild. So it's a kind of interesting journey to watch them and take my cues from them of what they want and what distance they feel comfortable with, and honor and respect that, which is hugely important to me.
Absolutely. That's interesting. So would you say that seeing the bad places that they came from and their suffering and what they've had to go through, is that what shifted your perspective to like, you know what? Maybe it's not really so important that we ride them?
I think because I see the results of abusive training, you know, that has quite clearly traumatized that horse because it's gone too fast or it's been too much for them to comprehend, and they have fought against it and, you know, suffered pain because of that. It has definitely changed my view. You know, while at the same time I can hold the view because I've seen Janelle Gentle, a completely wild horse that has come in and needs medical care, and I've seen her gentle horses in a completely, you know, respectful, cooperative, and kind way where the horse is, you know, definitely not traumatized into doing what we're asking them to do, whether that be, you know, get x-rays, give them medication, treat them for whatever. And we've had wild horses come in. I can think of Sinatra, and I think it was Rango. Both of them came in really traumatized, utterly traumatized from roundups and also being in the slaughter pipeline. And they stood in the chute that we have, and they weren't even squeezed. I mean, Sinatra had to be on a drip that took about 2.5 hours for it all to go through. And he was having that 3 or 4 times a day. Wow. And something about him knew that we were trying to help him. And he was calm. He let us handle him. So same as Rango, he had smashed open his skull at the kill pen, which so often happens because they run wildly into things. And he had this massive wound, you know, just under his forelock that needed a lot of suturing. It had become infected. It was covered in flies. You know, so we had to bring him home really quickly to do that. And for him to let the vet, you know, stitch up his head when he was completely wild off the range and had experienced nothing but abuse from humans that he'd been around. I just think their emotional intelligence is extraordinary. And it's why, I mean, I have such respect for them and such admiration for the way that they deal with things in captivity that are so foreign to them after the abuse they've gone through. It really is like mind-blowing to me. So you know, I just think that they know, and I think that they can feel intention, and I think they can feel the energy of the people handling them, and they're so insightful. And I mean, I feel like they're telepathic, you know, to use that word, but I really do I feel like there's a reason why they have such a complicated gut, you know, because they're just grazing herbivores. They don't need all of that. But I think, you know, when you say as a human, I felt it in my gut, you know, they're prey animals. They can feel a mountain lion looking at the back of their neck and turn and look at it. And I've even tried it with my horses. I've looked out the window and stared at one of them for a minute, and they turn and look at exactly where I am.
Whoa. And, I just got the chills.
But it's true, you know, and funnily enough, I read a book called The Sense of Being Stared At by a scientist that proved exactly that. You know, sometimes you're sitting in your car and you turn and someone's staring at you, you know, it's just, they have so many senses and they're in tune, especially being part of a herd. They can tell, you know, how the herd is feeling. They're very symbiotic in their relationship with each other, and their lives depend on it. So it's really important for them to be in tune with, okay, is this animal, which is really what we are they coming at me with anger or care and love? And I believe love is an energy, and it's when they get out of the trailer and I'll sit in the corner of a pen and I'll just literally say, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And I'll also make pictures in my head of like what's happened and how it's going to be now. And I try and pour as much love and respect into my voice when I'm speaking to them. And that's just really important to me, because I actually do think it makes a difference. And I actually do believe that they can feel that. And it changes the way that they behave towards us, which makes it safer for us.
True. I totally believe all of that, 100%. I think they completely understand. And when I got Miko, my Mustang, he was so mentally messed up from everything that had happened to him. And he was, quite honestly, he was dangerous at the time because of all that. He was just trying to survive. And people told me to kill him because he was so dangerous. They were like, this was when you first started, and they were like, you should send him to SkyDog. And I was like, I don't know. But I just sort of like, I think what you're speaking to is like this intuitive feeling. Like I had this intuitive feeling that I don't know if that was the right choice for him. Like, because he was just different around me, because I would do the same thing that you would do. I would sit in the stall and I would just be quiet and I would sort of like try to send him that energy and those messages, exactly what you're talking about. And I mean, it took years and I was kind of like, well, shoot, I don't know, maybe he should go there. But he has turned into like the most amazing horse ever and helps me train similar horses to him. And he's fantastic. But in the same sense, he will also buck anybody else off
Yeah.
who's not me. Because he's like, you didn't sit in the stall with me for thousands of hours.
Yeah.
You don't deserve this. And in that same light, I've had the same thought of like questioning riding or not. You know, because of him, I'm like, I don't know, does he enjoy it? But he does the same thing that those horses that you were talking about do. When there's a view, he looks out and he really takes it in. I'm like, what do
And
you
and I'm definitely not against riding, as you know, as long as it's nothing cruel. I mean, there are
totally?
so many disciplines in riding, sadly, that involve a lot of cruelty and force and
Yeah.
tools to make them do what you want them to do. And obviously, I draw my lines maybe in quicker places than others, but I also, think there is a kind way to do things and to have a cooperative relationship with your horse. And I see horses, hunter jumpers or massive show jumping horses that I feel they do, enjoy what they're doing to a
Right.
degree, and they're bred for that, and that's all they've ever known, and they
Hmm.
do understand the applause of the people, and when they do
Yes.
really well, and so I'm not entirely against it. It's just something. For a start, it doesn't really fit in with my life anymore. I don't even
Yeah.
have a riding horse that I could,
Uh-huh.
pull in off. I probably could with Buddy, but I think he'd spend the whole time calling to his herd or something.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I don't know. At this age, I don't really want to fall off. When I
Sure.
was younger, I used to bounce and I would be hanging around the neck of a horse, laughing so hard I was going to pee my pants. And
Uh-huh.
it was all part of the fun of riding, like getting
Right.
off or doing crazy stuff. And now I'm just like, you know what? I'm happy having my relationship with the horses we have on the ground. I mean, definitely I wouldn't consider riding any of our rescue horses, but
Hmm.
it's just, it's a personal thing. And the craziest thing is I actually read a book, and it was a biography or an autobiography by Bo Derek. And she had married her husband John Derek. They had this amazing ranch in Santa Ynez, and they bred Spanish horses, and their whole thing of their relationship was going on a ride kind of at the end of the day up the
Mm.
hill and watching the sunset and stuff.
Mm.
And she noticed that her husband had stopped. He would sort of say, oh, I'm busy, or I'm doing this, or, I'm not going to come today. And she said to him one day, like, why don't you come riding anymore as much? And he said, I suddenly stopped and thought, does the horse want to do that? Like, does he want to carry
Mm.
the hill? And I just decided that he didn't. And so I don't do it as much anymore. And I had never asked myself that question. I'd
No.
never even stopped to think, does the horse enjoy this? Is this, because I know we ran around those hills in Hollywood and it was hard ground. And I didn't really think, could it be,
Hard on their bodies or
yeah,
something.
hard on their
Yeah.
bodies,
Yeah.
yeah, like running up a hill and,
Mhm.
after being standing outside. And so I guess I just looked at everything different, and I asked myself those questions. And the craziest thing was, shortly, I had gone to rodeos for a long time. I'd even dated a steer wrestler, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Gone to the NFL finals in Vegas. And it was like, I had this kind of weird fantasy come from England about dating a cowboy.
Oh,
And
sure.
for me, it was like, I was like, this is Americana, the American flag, and John Wayne speaking, and these
Uh-huh.
kids on the back of sheep, mutton busting. And I never had seen it through that lens of cruelty to the animals.
Yeah.
And after I started SkyDog and I met my husband, I said, oh, you have to come to rodeo with me in Santa Barbara. It's this whole thing. They have this festival of the horses, before, and then we can go to the rodeo. And for some reason, I just saw it completely differently. Like I saw the spurs, I saw the arch bits, I saw the horses dancing, and I knew how they made them dance now. And I knew, those horses, and I took a lot of pictures, and I had in the past, and the pictures had always looked so beautiful to me. And in every picture, a horse was kind of like its mouth was being yanked and it had wild eyes. And it was just the pictures. And I was like, oh no, that is not a horse that is loving that,
Right.
So I guess through a different lens, you can see the exact same thing different, and when you know better, you do better, and you change. And I think that's a personal journey for everybody. And I don't think any less of friends of mine that still go riding and, but it's hard because you see pictures they post on Instagram of like riding the horses on the beach in Mexico, but you kind of know now those horses probably didn't get any water and they're skinny as all hell underneath that massive saddle. And even though you want those pictures for Instagram, because there just is a lot of cruelty, and I was thinking, I'm going to start a change.org petition against Bravo, because they always show people in a carriage in New York or Charleston or wherever that, though not just Bravo, but all kind of reality shows, they always go for a ride on these horses on the beach or do something. And you kind of go, oh, like now I know where those horses live at night, the New York carriage horses. And so you can't enjoy it or love it for the horses. But it's like, I just have to stay in my box and go, okay, I'm just trying to sort my little part of the world out and trying to save as many wild horses as I can. And I can't fix the whole world to look at life the way I do, or look at these animals through my lens. It's
I think that's all you can do, really, and do your best. And that whole thought of, are they enjoying that? And is this just for me? I mean, that's exactly why I asked you to take Pete, because I was trying to gentle him, and his zebra side was like, I don't really want to. And it is, I was trying it in all the gentle ways, and it just, he didn't want it. And so that's how I honored him. And it's funny because you could be like, well, your Mustang was maybe feeling the same way, but it was in a different sense. Like I don't know. They were just very different about it. And I think obviously it was the best decision ever for Pete and for Miko too. And I'm just so glad he's there.
Well, I mean, honestly, from my point of view, I have the most enormous amount of respect for you that you did listen to him and that you saw those signs, because every animal is different. And, we'll have horses come in that are literally off the range, but are friendly. And I'll come up to you and be like, want cookies, want scratches. And I'm like, there is no good explanation for why this horse is like this, as opposed to a horse that literally you see the whites of their eyes anytime you even pull up in a Polaris, they have a different personality and they have a different comfort level about being close to people. And I do think that, I wish I could tell people if they're, I think the internet adoption is such a stupid thing, because people are just seeing a picture of a horse and going, I want a blue one, or
you don't know anything about them.
They know nothing about their temperament. Whereas if you actually go to the corrals, you will have those horses that don't run away the minute you pull up and come closer because they're curious. And it's obvious that it's going to be a horse that is going to take better and adjust better to domestic life than a horse that is wild-eyed and running into fences to get away from you, you know? So I really feel like that should be encouraged a lot when you're picking a wild horse. And it used to be so like that at the BLM Burns Corral. Like Wendy Rickman, who used to work there, she knew every horse in that corral. She, you know, if someone came and said, I'm looking for this, she would take them and kind of go, no, you don't want that. You know, this is actually a good horse for you, and knew about their temperaments. And I remember going into the pens with her, which I've never been allowed to do since, but all the horses came up to her, you know, and she was touching them all. And that was an extraordinary thing. And even actually at Ridgecrest, all the local people go there and give them carrots to the donkeys and the horses. They're all super tame to people. And I'm like, God, that's something you should so capitalize on, you know, because that is going to be an easier transition. They've already associated these two-legged things to food and and kindness. So like, they're going to make that next step easier. So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of things I feel like the BLM could do better if
That's
they wanted to, and if they made a little bit of effort.
that's a really good point. And one thing that I think I really went back to when I was struggling with Miko in those early days, and I still stick by it today, is I think gentling a wild horse like that, if you can, if they are amenable to it, and really any horse, proper training, you could say the same thing for dogs. I think it actually sets them up for success in life
Yeah.
because they are more attuned to us weird two-legged creatures
Yeah.
and they're less, they'll just fit in better with our lives, which is the unfortunate truth is like they have to. And when an animal doesn't fit into the human world, that's when bad things happen to them.
Yeah, and it's going back to that old kind of training that was cowboy mentality
Hmm.
to dominate and break the spirit of a wild horse and force them to do. And I know my horse Buddy, he'd come out of the prison program, so he was somewhat trained, but the
Yeah.
girl that had him before me, there was a trainer that came to Sunset Ranch and was going to work with some of the horses, and I know that he hobbled Buddy. So
Mm.
he laid him down on the ground and I think tied his legs together and then stood on him, sat on him, left him there in the sun all day. And
Oy.
people had to leave the ranch because they were so upset by what he was doing. But he
Yeah.
was like, he has to learn patience and he has to learn that I am dominant of him. And
Mm.
to this day, Buddy has a fear of men with cowboy hats. He didn't like
Oh,
men riding him. He did really well with me, but I look back on that and it breaks my heart, but that's a pretty normal thing. I saw a video even just the other day of a girl and she had just hobbled the
yeah.
front feet of this horse, wild horse, and he was just thrashing, like trying to stay on his feet and,
Right.
fell to the ground eventually. And she was laying there petting him and everything and saying, it's the
Mm.
quickest way. But it's like, I don't believe that's the best route to go for the horse to
No,
end up
yeah.
thinking they have to do that, otherwise it's going to cause them pain, and
Right.
I don't know, it's lazy and it's unnecessary, and I don't think it leads to a good partnership, with a horse based
Oh, yeah.
on full terms. And I mean, I'm talking a lot about training, but it's like, I don't know, it's hard for us because we do see the end results of a lot of, we get a lot of trainer relinquishments, a lot of horses that return to the corrals that are
Yeah.
untrainable, and then you meet them like spirit to spirit and you find out who that horse is and you're
Hmm.
like, man, you actually would have been an amazing, I think you would have been amazing gentles and riding, and like, because you're so smart and you're
Yeah.
so understanding of like, oh, I want you to do this, or
Hmm.
cooperative in the shoot or any of those things. And it's just that whoever had them went about it in such a rough and quick way. And often with these training challenges, they have
They're
90
so
days.
fast.
And like you say, I mean, I remember this woman, she got two wild horses. She sat in their pen reading a book to them every night for like 2 years. And
Yeah.
actually, like, they came up to her. She didn't know anything about training. She didn't want to do anything. She just wanted them to be used to her so she could
Mm.
handle them for
Hmm.
feet and, medical things. And of course, not many people have 2 years, but I love it when a trainer will be like, I'm taking him out of the challenge, because his mind is not that kind of mind that can get
Right.
there in 90 days,
Yeah.
and nor should it be, like, nor should
Hmm.
they be forced into that box. It is a lot to process in
Hmm.
90 days to get to a place where they're doing tricks in an arena and walking on bridges and,
It's true.
have a clown costume on. It's like, okay, maybe you could get there, but I
Right.
don't, it's hard seeing the fallout of that,
Yeah.
and what it's done to the horse and how shut down they are and how dead in the eye they are and how they've
Hmm.
just given up and are just doing what they're doing out of fear, or,
Hmm.
so yeah, sorry, it's a whole, I don't know how we went in that direction either. Now we're
That's
talking
okay.
about training,
It's
which we
true.
do none of.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is it's funny to talk about that and then compare it to how the horses do live at SkyDog, which is the point is that they are out on hundreds and thousands of acres in their herds, living how they used to be. They only get handled like a few times a year. And it's, I think, what they want. And I think it's why they thrive and why the light comes back in their eyes, how you said. I mean, I see it in Pete's eyes, I know those eyes very well. I can picture him perfectly. And I think that he was, happy enough with me, but to compare him from then to now, it's like unreal. And I even get messages from people who were like, "Oh my God, did you see his eyes or like his coat?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know. That's why. Like this is why, and that's how they should be." And I just think like what you're doing is amazing, and you have such an awesome staff there as well who help you. And I think this would be a good point to like shift into so like SkyDog as a rescue and like so you went from okay, I think I should rescue like you've had like 10 originally last time we talked about how you started and now you have over 300. So like how do you manage the mental load of like the responsibility of caring for all of those heartbeats, and realizing like, oh, this horse needs that, and we got to rush to the vet, or we just have to feed, or we have to fix this fence. I mean, there's so much that you have to be on top of, and like you truly are. Like you have an amazing team, but you also know everything that's happening.
I do. And I do have an amazing team. And I'm so lucky to have Janelle. She's the heart and soul of so much of what happens at SkyDog, and I have the most enormous amount of respect for her, and weirdly her for me. And we have an amazing relationship because we decided, like, I don't know, it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I think we hadn't fallen out, but we had a disagreement about something.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, we kind of weren't talking as much, and it wasn't like hugely apparent, but we were just both kind of hurt about something probably.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what it was. But I remember saying to her, you know what, Janelle, we cannot fall out. Like we have to understand and agree that we cannot let the human condition affect what happens to these horses, because I've seen it happen so many times with executive directors of sanctuaries falling out with their equine manager and then the place falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no matter what it is, we have to resolve it, or we have to meet each other in the middle, and both of us have to compromise. Like it has to be like a marriage. Like sometimes, and we haven't really had any kind of issue since, because we both decided we were going to put the horses first against any personal feelings. Like we're working so close together. Of course, there are going to be things, sure. And she does love me to take responsibility for everything, which is why she always asks, is it okay to turn these two out with the herd? And then I always have to say yes, because if anything went wrong, then it's on because I said it, which I appreciate. I absolutely understand that ultimately I'm responsible for all the decisions, and I take responsibility for them, and I hold myself accountable. And I would never blame Janelle for something that went wrong. They're wild horses. Sure. There are things that are going to happen. And it's just kind of knowing that, but we have such a good shorthand with each other. We text pretty much every day, just me to her. We'll have 2 or 3 phone calls a week if we're in different states. And as well as that, we have a kind of equine staff thread that people put on updates about the medical stuff. So everyone is up to date on that, even when I'm away. And it's just, there is so much there. I don't think people would really understand just running a 9,000 acre ranch. And as you say, like trees fall down on fences, and cows break down a fence from the next ranch and things. So to constantly, we have an amazing ranch crew who are mostly the guys. We have one guy that actually is a farrier as well, and he does some of the horse stuff with Janelle. But mostly the girls are on the equine staff, although the girls will go out and burn juniper, with the guys, or make files if they have time, and pull weeds even, it's like everything to keep the land healthy and be good stewards of that land, and to try and leave it healthier than when we found it. And I do believe that the horses are really good for the land. We do practice a lot of pasture rotation. So we move, we let the grasses come up, and then we allow a certain amount of time before we move them on, and then onto the next pasture. And we're very lucky to have the amount of space to be able to do that. And even I do that down here in the Malibu. We have like everything in sections, and we like right now we have certain sections. We put a lot of grass seed down, and we've left horses off there to let the grass grow. And that side of it is like a whole skill and knowledge in itself to understand all that. and even poisonous plants, like to make sure that there's nothing that is on this land that is toxic to them, that can make them sick. I mean, the weight of responsibility is huge, but I think between me and Janelle and the others, like Megan, who is Janelle's second, she's incredible, and her daughter Morgan also works there, and we have Chelsea and Kaylee and Taylor, and all these incredible people, Mariah who comes and mucks, we have volunteers that come and muck. That's a massive part of what we do too, because we muck the pens every day, so yeah, it never ends, and it's always something. And I have learned that, and it's okay. I can handle the weight of it. It's like I'd much rather handle the weight of the responsibility of the horses than the noise that comes from outside the sanctuary at us is a lot more difficult to handle than the emotional toll that rescuing these horses has on us. I'm like, come on, we already have this, which takes a huge emotional toll on us. Do we really need to fight you as well?
Exactly.
So it's kind of that I could do without, and I do think it's a part of rescue that I feel like it's gotten quieter for us in the last year or two, just because I feel like, it takes a really long time for people to kind of shut up and kind of go, okay, we're criticizing this, but really, they're not doing anything wrong, and they do take really good care of the horses, and the horses do look good, and all their feet are trimmed, and look at the vet care they're giving. And, I think it has got a little quieter, but, yeah. So that's probably the one part of it that I don't love.
Yeah. I mean, isn't there saying, like, if you're doing something well, like, you're always going to have haters or something like that. Like, if you're not doing it well, then you're not going to have haters. But what I think is
my mom used to say, a bright light attracts moths and bugs. And I think I like to look at it like that. I feel like our light shines really, really bright, and it does upset the dark part of some people and brings out the worst in them. And I found a really good saying, actually, and I posted it in stories yesterday, and it was something about, I don't know, the psychology of it and why people do it. But yeah, I for my most part, I don't look at it. I don't read it. I don't open screenshots that people send me or links that I don't know what they are, because once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And no matter how strong of a person you are, once it's in your brain, it's like a little wormhole. It's kind of there niggling, and it'll wake you up at 4 a.m, and I'm like, why wait? Oh, I'm thinking about that comment. But that's just the human condition. I can look at 600 comments saying something good, and there'd be one bad. And the human part of you that wants everyone to like you is like, oh, why'd they have to say that? But it's fine, for the most part. I kind of feel like it's a much more of a reflection on what's going on in their brain than what we're doing. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's so amazing about horses, and this is, I know, something we touched on before, is that you can have all of that going on, but then you can walk outside your door and you can muck and you can feed. And like, when I love that we talked about this when it's raining and we make the little like diversions for the water with our feet, with our little boots. And like, it's just all of that sort of repetitive things that we do with horses is actually like so meditative.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but that all of those kind of mundane things that we did when we were young horse girls, that maybe we were like, oh, I don't want to muck out this stall today. It's like, now we love it. And it's so helpful. Like, I pick up poop every day here at my place, and I really look forward to it for that reason.
I think it's really grounding. It's really humbling. I know there are people that think I probably don't do that anymore. I literally will do that in the evenings after everyone's gone, or I'll just go out, and because the volunteers are here and I'm talking to them, I'll do it too. And it's honestly, I miss those days, like it was so simple at the beginning when we first started, and we only had when I first had my horses, they were at a barn, and then there was just so much barn drama, and I made it my mission to like buy my own place in Calabasas, and I took my horses there because it was just my dream to look out of my window and see them. But I realized Calabasas was like 110 degrees all summer, so I having to get up at 5 a.m. to like feed and water and, you know, let the horses out. And I would just be drenched in sweat. You know, we would have to ride before the sun even came up, you know, if we wanted to ride because it was so hot.
Yeah.
But those days were like so good, you know, doing it all myself. I didn't even need help. And just having that relationship with my horses. And I think I was saying another time, I was like, you know, when I first was starting, I went around to all the other sanctuaries and met the people from the sanctuaries. And I remember one of them saying, oh, I haven't touched a horse in years. I spend all my time fundraising and doing admin. And I was like, we'll never be that person, you know?
Yeah.
I really carve out the time, even like 2 or 3 times a day, even though sometimes it's like there are volunteers outside I really like seeing and I love them and they're probably some of my best friends. But even on top of that, it's just like to stop, you know, when I'm getting all worked up or kind of like anxious about something or feeling the weight of that responsibility or something's gone wrong with a horse and I'm worried about them, going outside and like getting my heart rate in tune with the horses, you know, because like they can do that, you know, they can feel your heartbeat and they have such a huge energetic field that they can bring your heart rate down. And I feel it, you know, I'm like just putting my hand on a horse and spending time with them. And then knowing where they came from and what they look like now gives me such a sense of pride and happiness and joy for them that, you know, they now don't have 3 wrinkles over their eye and waiting for the shoe to drop and wondering where they're going next. And, you know, it's just such a blessing to be able to give them that peace of mind and let them live this life. And, you know, but as you say, it's been raining here for the last 3 days. And I was out doing that with my boot, like making gullies so the water would drain. And it's just, there's something about it that takes me back to that, you know, beginning where I used to do stuff like that because I was the only one there. I'm like, I have to make a trench and get this water because otherwise they're standing in a pool of water, you know. And it's just, you don't really forget those things. And it's a joy before all the weight of the responsibility when I just had 3 mustangs and a quarter horse. And yeah, so it's nice to think of that. But I also did want to say to you, you know, I have the most amount of respect for you when you talk about Pete. And, you know, you tried to train him and then noticed that he didn't really want that for himself. Like, you love that animal. Like, you love Pete, you know, and it's very, very apparent how much you love him. And I felt the other time about the woman that sent Ember to us. She was a trainer and she had trained dozens of horses for Mustang challenges. And when she contacted me, she had seen the Goliath video and she saw her horse Ember in it. And the whole time she was training her, she had felt like her mind was somewhere else and she would look off into the distance. And even her husband had said that horse doesn't want to be here and its mind is somewhere else. Like, and when she saw her in the video, and that horse is an extraordinary looking horse. There's no way you can't be moved by her.
True.
And in the same way for Pete, you know, he is an extraordinary animal. And I absolutely know you could have sold him for thousands to someone, you know, and thought, oh, I can't train him, but maybe this trainer will get farther with him or whatever. And same with Ember. She could have kept going with her and done a Mustang challenge. And just the look of her would have been extraordinary. But the fact that you put his needs and wants and likes before yours and also made the sacrifice to kind of let go of something that you loved so much is huge to me. You know, it makes me want to cry because there's not that many people that do that. You know, they make decisions based on money predominantly, you know, and what's best for them. But it's a rare bird that makes a decision because they can tell that's where the animal is going to be happiest, even if it means they're not going to see them every day, and also have to share them with an enormous amount of people because, you know, it's a blessing and a curse that we are so well followed and everybody has opinions, and it actually stops a lot of people from sending a horse to SkyDog, not because they've read something on the internet, they're scared of telling the story because maybe they'll be blamed or judged, you know, and demonized in the story for doing whatever they did. And it's a hard one. Some people really, really want to send their horse to SkyDog because then they're going to be famous and maybe they're, you know, they're going to get sort of some reflected glory from it. But then there are others that the horse doesn't have such a good story. And anyway, I just think it's a really brave thing because you do, in a way, it was like you're a Pete. But then there's all these thousands of people that know Pete, love Pete, and say, there's my Pete, you know. And I often wonder what that's like for someone, you know, who has that deep bond with an animal. So I just have an enormous amount of respect for you for making that choice. And I wanted to thank you for it. So,
Oh, that makes me tear up. That's really sweet. And, people have asked me in the past, like, that must have been so hard for you. And the truth is, once he went to you, because, I tried to go somewhere else, I was like, no, this is a very clear, like, this is an easy decision because this is what he wants and it's what he needs and he deserves. And, like, I don't ever lose sleep over it. Before, I did a little bit when I sent him to the first sanctuary because even though they're great, we just like the plans that we had didn't work out. And at that point, I was like, oh, I don't know. But now I don't worry about it at all. And I'm thrilled that he's there. And I said to you when I brought him there, I was like, if you want to share him, you can. If not, don't. I understand. Like this is kind of because it does create this like, well, are we maybe encouraging people to have
yeah,
zebras and
yeah,
zonkies and zorses? And
yeah,
and I know that you and I talked about that, but I think in the way that you have shared his transition and his time there, it's the opposite. It fuels why we shouldn't have them,
yeah.
you
I
know?
think that was a really important part of his story because I didn't want to make him famous and then everybody wants a Zorse and it encourages people down the road to be breeding more of them. And I don't
Right.
think it's a good idea. And I don't like the idea of hybrids. And
Hmm.
we've got two zonkies as well who are both super wild.
Yeah.
And so many of them end up in kill pens and auctions for a reason, you know, and they've
Hmm.
really, zebras as well. Like the whole thing of seeing zebras endlessly in livestock auction. And I know it's a byproduct of the canned hunt ranching,
Yeah.
but it's so wrong to take these babies away from their mothers at days old, make them dependent on humans, put a little halter on covered in
Hmm.
crystals, and be
Hmm.
leading them around a ring with a bucket of milk. When
Right.
that animal grows up, and I mean, Ziggy picked when he and the other zebra got equine herpes from being at auction and in the slaughter
Yeah.
pipeline. One of them died of that, and
Hmm.
Ziggy survived but was sick for a while. And when he was being handled, he kicked one of the girls that
Uh,
was doing his meds
yeah.
and gave her a bone bruise that she had to be off for like 3 months.
Oh
Their
wow.
kick is 3 times that of a grown horse. They are
Yeah.
so strong, and they can kick a hyena and kill it, you know,
Right.
or in it's just they shouldn't be, you know, people are going to get hurt trying to
Hmm.
bring them up as pets and treat them that way. And it's just really, yeah, it's just unethical and it's really irresponsible to sell them as pets. And yes,
Yeah.
you could have a zebra that has a different personality, but for the most part,
It's
I
so
would,
rare though.
yeah, you have to be super aware, you know,
Yeah.
and they're not, you know, we have a lot of respect and we treat Ziggy with kid gloves. And, you
Hmm.
know, luckily for him, he always gets bonded to a horse. So anytime we want to move him or do anything, when we evacuated, you just
Hmm.
put the horse on and he jumps on, you know,
That's
same
good.
with boots. They have such FOMO. But they're
Yeah.
definitely, you know, the hybrids, the zebras, all of it is, yeah. I mean, they could really hurt a child who
Yes.
you maybe bought one for their birthday to have a zebra. It's just not a good idea. And it's really irresponsible to breed zebras with donkeys or horses. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that was so much a part of his story and his message. And, you know, when
Hmm.
everyone's like, oh my God, he's so beautiful, I want one. People are always like, I want one. And I'm like,
No.
no, why do you have to blurt that out? Why is that your first impulse? I see it, I want one. You know, I'm like, there's a lot that goes into handling this animal safely.
Yeah. Like
And
you have no idea. I mean, yeah, he definitely has his sweet moments where he loves his ear
he does.
scratches and stuff, but that's about it. Anything else? Like I tried to handle his feet and he was like, I'd really rather not. I'm like, all right, fine. You need to go somewhere with a shoot.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
he's
And
there.
that's good. And that shoot is like, I felt like we were being responsible taking him on. Like Ziggy's here in Malibu at the moment, but he'll probably go back up in the spring just so that he can have his feet done in the shoot without hurting anyone, but he's so happy here. I don't really think he does well in the cold weather, even though I was like, well, I looked it up and people were like, yeah, they, in Africa, they sometimes live up these mountains and it's this temperature. Not all of Africa is like boiling hot savanna, but even there were zebras in the Utah Zoo running in the snow and stuff. But I was like, I just don't think it's ideal for them. And so it seemed better to just bring him down here for winter. Not that he seemed sick or anything, but it was like, look, he might as well. And we all do well handling him. But yeah, Pete is exactly where he should be. As you can see, he enjoys going as far as he possibly can from humans for the entire spring and summer, and that's where he'll take off to again soon. And I can't wait not to see him again.
Exactly.
It's fun in winter. We get to see him a lot, and I'll give him a cookie when he comes up. But he's more than happy to be off over his hill with Soleil and Hera and Strongheart. And Hera again is Hera is the horse that ran over Janelle and broke her leg. Like where Hera, she could have chosen to go many other directions, but she ran straight over Janelle. And Janelle was moved, like her shoes were on the ground where she had been standing without her in them. And she was like 10 feet back.
My God.
And broke her leg, but took 2 days off from work, which was extraordinary. That's because I didn't take any time off work when I had the same break in my leg. So I was like, oh, come on, it doesn't really hurt. But run over by any horse is traumatizing and incredibly dangerous. But it's like, of course it's Hera that has left for the hills with Pete and doesn't want to see a person. You learn a lot about horses when you're in a small space with them.
You sure do. You sure do. Yeah, I think they are exactly where they need to be. And going back a little bit, I wanted to touch on what draws people to SkyDog and the horses there, because you do have such a strong social media following, which I think is a blessing. And if you read the comments, just like people are so connected to them. And I just find that so beautiful. Like you were saying, how would you feel about all these people having this connection to Pete? And I just think it's really sweet. A lot of people, I get messages from my account that people are like, oh, I go on every day because, it's an escape from things that are going on in my life or the world. And I just want to see how these animals are doing. And as you touched on earlier too, like a lot you can see when you bring in a horse from the kill pen to where they are, in a few months, it's an amazing transformation. And I think people love to feel a part of that.
Yeah, I think they do. And it's definitely what I set out to do. I kind of felt like, if you say a dry fact, like at the time, 150,000 horses shipped to slaughter every year. If you say this is Badger, meet Badger, fall in love with Badger, 150,000 of Badgers, like horses like Badger shipped to slaughter. If they have an emotional connection, which I feel like all of our followers do, they are really emotionally connected and love these animals. They really do. And they know their names and their stories, and it's extraordinary. They're much more likely to either donate, sponsor, join us on Patreon to see more of it because the videos are nice and they want to see behind the scenes, but also to pick up the phone to their representative and find out more about wild horses and take an action and speak up for them when they need to be spoken up for. And I think it's funny because SkyDog came from a Native American story about Native American Indians, the Blackfoot Indians, seeing horses for the first time and being terrified. And the chief said, no, they are like the elk and the buffalo. They are sent to help us from the old man in the sky. They are sky dogs or spirit dogs. And I just loved the imagery and the whole Native American, like on our ranch, we have a lot of old homesteads, but I'm never as excited about them than if I find an arrowhead and I know that it was a kind of summer hunting ground for Native American Indians. I just think that connection is really important to me because like SkyDog is that. And so, I do think it's really important to like connect people to like where these horses came from and speaking up for them. And it's a big part of what we do, educating, raising awareness, getting people to fall in love with these horses so that they speak up for them. And, I'm really proud of that, you know, because that was where I was getting to in that story, that I kind of thought about Native people, they don't like to be Native American, I think. Native people say, they tell stories, you know, that's how they pass down information through generations. And I thought, if I just keep telling the stories of these horses, like that's what I can do. I can speak for them and tell either the story of their herd that they lived in the wild and what's happening to it, or the situation they ended up in once they were adopted out, you know. So it's like, you know, this horse ended up in a Mexican tripping rodeo and these things should be banned, or, you know, all the different things. And their stories elevate, you know, that conversation. Like, you know, we take a horse like Stetson, who's a PMU baby, and be able to tell people every time we share about him, we can talk about Premarin. And there's always one or two ladies on there that say, oh my gosh, I did not know. My doctor never told me. They just gave me this drug for hot flashes, and I didn't know that it came from pregnant mare's urine. And it's like, to have that platform and be able to educate and make little wheels that people can share and more people find out means a lot to me, you know, that we might help in the lessening of suffering for horses in different disciplines, or, you know. So I take that responsibility very seriously too. I'm constantly trying to educate people about, you know, even about rescue. And that's a hard one to navigate, because if you say anything bad about a rescue, you know, rescue shouldn't talk badly about another rescue, or they're bullying, or they're jealous. And it's like, well, at what point do you want us to say something when there's that many red flags? Do you want me to wait until there's a pile of bodies and then say something? And then you all go, well, someone should have done something. But it's like, well, we can't, because you all get upset, you know. And there's all these rescues that play the victim and sort of like a martyr of, you know, oh, people are saying bad things. It's such a hard arena to navigate, because there are bad actors, there are bad rescues, there are people doing bad things just for the money. And using the suffering of these animals to make an enormous amount of money for themselves, you know. But it's hard. Like I am at the moment, really like, just stay in your lane. I don't, you know, I've just gone through a year of hell, of helping a bunch of horses that came out of a bad rescue, and that happened like now in the last couple of days. We can finally come out and say, you know, and we've had to save the last few that ended up back at auction. But it's been really hard on me, and it's been really hard on everyone trying to help that situation without being perceived or losing donors, because we're like, mass bailing is not sustainable. And then it's like, oh, I'm unfollowing and never donating to you again. And I'm like, okay, but I'm just trying to help the horses, because of where they're ending up. But, you know, there are so many things that we could talk for an hour on, you know. So it's just like, right now I'm like, I'm just sticking with my SkyDog horses, and I rescue them and I bring them home, and I don't really want to look at anyone else for like a year, you know, because it's a quagmire of thick mud of, you know, going through that and trying to educate on that subject. And I'm like, you know, a lot of us have kind of given up, because we're like, we'll just keep doing it right and keep trying to be the gold standard and keep showing people what it should look like. And then maybe they can decide for themselves, well, this doesn't look like that, you know. And hopefully that will do it, because it's going to have to be enough, because I haven't got it in me to do any more.
No, I think it is. I think there's a lot of subtle power and suggestion, and just exactly that, just saying, hey, look at how we've done it. We don't need to like call names and all this type of stuff. And here's this example, here's this example. You decide, you make up what you think is right. And I think at the end of the day, your model and what you're doing is going to shine through. Like you said, your light is very bright. And I think you have a lot that you've obviously done a lot already. And I think you have a lot that you will continue to do.
I hope so.
Yes. Well, we're coming up on that hour, but before we go, we got to share the fun horse fact. And I don't know if you decided like general or a fact about one of your horses.
Do you know, a fun horse fact? I don't even know. There must be so many. I didn't actually come up with one in the end, because I did have kind of a busy morning. But there is one story about my very first horse, Elvis, is a quarter horse, and I got him first. He was my riding horse, and he was just a problem child. He constantly had vet bills up the wazoo. Like just if he could be anywhere and hurt himself, he colicked and had to have a hugely expensive surgery. He just was like, I started thinking that he must have some veterinarian handbook in his stall, and he would like, how do I get 2 months of stall rest, and what do I need to like show in symptoms? And I remember like I had started SkyDog, and now I was getting more and more horses. And at the beginning, obviously, I was paying all their vet bills as well by myself because we weren't really fundraising a lot. It took us a while to build up that platform. And Elvis just kept having a bill, and you know, he would eat a plant. He ate some castor bean plant, and it turned, I mean, it was hysterical. So it has some thing in it that if you're everywhere that you're white, he got these kind of welts on his body, and his hair fell off, and we didn't know it was a toxic weed, but all the other horses of course didn't have any white on them, and if they'd eaten it, it didn't show. But Elvis had this. Weird. And he had to have a cape on. He had this great big fly mask. He had fly boots on it because it had a like photosynthesis with the sun. So you had to, and he had a big fly mask. And I remember like he'd been in the barn for a while, and I thought we should turn him out with some of the mustangs just in a pen and let him be with other horses. You know, he doesn't need the medication anymore. And the next day I went there to feed him, and they had torn apart his cape, his mask, his boots. It was shredded, and he was standing there like, I think there's something wrong, but I don't know. Anyway, I said to my vet one day, it was he had yet another injury, and I said, you know, what do people do if they can't afford a vet bill? Because like he just keeps running up these massive $20,000 bills for my husband, and I have other horses. And she goes, well, most people wouldn't do it, you know, they would just, he said, you just look at him, take him by the ears gently and say, look, Elvis, there isn't any more money in the vet fund for you, and if this happens again, I swear I did it. And he has never had a vet, like he's never had anything since. One of those fun, it's just when you said a fun fact, he now lives with the Mustangs, thinks he's a Mustang, runs with them, never has an injury, and never, you know, before it would be like his eyelash would be poking in his eye or something. Now he's like tough, and he's like, why would I want to come in the barn, Mom? I'm like, these are my friends. And so it just shows that even horses can change, and even very domesticated horses with a lot of issues can decide one day, nope, I'm gonna be tough like my Mustang friends. And he has been ever. There's a story I've never told before.
Oh, fun.
Elvis.
He sounds great. I can't wait to see him next time.
Yes, I will have to point him out to you.
Yeah, or maybe he's in the big herd with Buddy.
Yeah, no, actually now he's with the boys herd on the lower ranch. He's a paint horse. He's really pretty. Yeah. And I love Elvis, but he's a bit of a problem child. Not anymore, but he was.
Yeah. Well, I know when I come visit, you're always like, who do you want to see? And I will put him on my list.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Yeah. Well, I will we expect a visit this spring or summer? You're going to come and see Pete as you were lucked out last time.
Yes. Well, I would love to, but I'm thinking that maybe winter is the best time when he's actually around.
It is. Well, he's around now. You're welcome anytime.
Well, thank you. Yeah, maybe I guess I should come soon.
Well, it'll be a while. You got a good couple of months.
Oh, okay.
Just a muddy like right now it's thick snow, but come anytime. And I think he'll only, the funniest thing was that day you came to see him and look for him for 4 hours. The next day, my donor, like one of our board members, went out and she was showing me the pictures, and I was like, oh, you saw Pete? And she goes, oh yes, I come around the corner and he's standing in the road. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I couldn't even believe it because you worked so hard for him the day before. But that's Pete for you.
That's how it goes. And well, the first time I went to see him, he was literally right in front of the gate, and I was like, no way. Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. But yes, thank you so much for doing this.
You're
I really appreciate it. I know you have lots to do, so I'll let you go. And I would love to come visit sometime.
Perfect. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Lots of love.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Human Animals. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. I'll be back next time to dive deeper into the fascinating world of human-animal connections. Until then, take a moment to appreciate the animals in your life and tell them I said hi. You can get to know me and my animals better and see upcoming guests by following @BrianKangle, that's BrianKangal, on Instagram and TikTok. Okay, bye!